The UFC has officially launched their grappling reality show, UFC BJJ Road to the Title, and the grappling community is confused? Guys, this is Sean with PDMA, and I am back on YouTube. First YouTube video in a while, so for those who have seen my old videos, thank you for watching. For those who are new to the channel, welcome. As I said, today we are going to be talking about the UFC BJJ Road to the Title, or as it's been referred to, at least in my circles, the Ultimate Grappler. I think there was a marketing issue with that name. Anyway. So today we're going to go into some details about some of the opinions that I'm seeing on this show. At the time of recording this video, episode 5 just aired, and at the time this video comes out, I believe that is all that will be out. So we're going to talk up through episode 5 of the BJJ Road to the Title put on by the UFC. So as I mentioned, I've been kind of away for a little bit, so I haven't had the opportunity to kind of cover everything that's been going on leading up to this. I actually did mention that this was probably going to happen in an old video, and I'll link that here if you want to go check that out. But let's just start with the first thing that a lot of us heard of about this series, and that was the teams. Now, I'm not just going to give my opinion on the teams, or rather the roster. I do want to talk about some things that I heard about when that roster first came out, and actually some things that are still being talked about now. So the roster in general was interesting. So I think a lot of the confusion here from the roster, and a lot of like the talks that I heard about before this show started, and we're going to go into a lot of stuff about the show, I just kind of want to cover this pre-section here, but a lot of what I heard about before the show started was people were confused. What exactly are we going for here? So when we look at something like The Ultimate Fighter, which I think is a pretty logical comparison to talk about here, we're talking about up-and-coming fighters who are making their way into the UFC, generally speaking. In other words, that season where they had the veterans and everything like that. But this is different. So I think a lot of people were thinking that this was going to be people that were up-and-coming in grappling. And that's true for a lot of these people. I think some of these people are sort of on the precipice of where they're going to ultimately be. But then you had a couple guys in there that you're just like, well, this is a very accomplished athlete. And I think the most notable example there is Andrew Tackett. So the inclusion of somebody like Andrew Tackett kind of signaled that, oh no, this is going to be for people who are already very accomplished in this game, which is great. And there's obviously some people on there, you know, Josh Cisneros is on there. There's a bunch of guys that have very legitimate accomplishments in submission grappling. And then you have some people that were brought in that almost kind of seem more like that up-and-comer model that they use for the Ultimate Fighter. And I think a good example of that is somebody, and all the wrestling fans are going to go nuts here, like Jason Nolf.
Do you have a question, Kelly?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
So Jason Nolf is obviously a very accomplished wrestler, but he doesn't have many accomplishments in the terms of submission grappling. He hasn't really been doing it for that long to even earn some of those accomplishments. And so when we're looking at that, we're wondering, okay, what is the UFC's philosophy here? And now I am going to chime in with my opinion here, and I think it's like one real simple philosophy. It's marketing. I'm saying this because I am a marketer by trade, but I mean, if you look at it, you have somebody who appeals to everybody, right? We have our mix of Brazilians, we have our wrestler, we have our Andrew Tackett, we have somebody like Kevon Gonzalez, who's phenomenal on Instagram and has a really good way of bringing people in. We have a really good mix of that. So I think when a lot of people are comparing this to The Ultimate Fighter and thinking, oh, this is supposed to be up-and-coming people, yes, but we also have to remember that the UFC is one of the greatest marketing machines just in the world, not just in combat sports, not just in sports, but in the world. And they kind of know what they're doing with this, and I have a real feeling that that was kind of the aim. Now, whether they actually accomplished that, you know, we're probably going to talk about that a little bit more later in the video, but I genuinely think that was their aim. Let's get a Jason Nolf in there to get our wrestlers in here. Let's get a couple Brazilian guys. Let's get a couple people that are more accomplished in submission grappling, ADCC, IBJJF, PGF, with Elijah Carlton. And I think that was kind of their aim with that. So now let's talk about something that everybody has been talking about, the coaches. So obviously one of those coaches was Mikey Musumeci. That is a decision that the UFC made, and we're going to go a little bit more into that. But first, I do want to cover the other coach, Harrison Gabriel. And now maybe this makes me a bad member of the grappling community, but I'm just going to be completely honest with you guys. I never heard of Harrison before this, or at least I thought I hadn't heard of him. After he was announced, I was kind of asking around, I was like, who is this guy? And somebody reminded me that he beat Diogo Reyes, and he's a Pan Am champion in the gi, so that's great. I mean, super phenomenally talented individual. Once somebody kind of pointed out who he was, went back and watched some of his matches, and I mean, he is super talented. But I think there's actually a couple fair criticisms that I've been reading a lot about of putting Harrison on this show. And again, this isn't necessarily against Harrison himself. This is just against kind of the choice to put him there. Number one being that he doesn't speak English super well. I give all credit to the guy. I mean, he's doing a show in his second language, which is very, very impressive. And obviously the UFC is not just going after the American audience. However, I mean, the American audience is kind of your primary audience, and your primary audience is English speaking, and I think his lack of ability to speak English, and I mean that in the most respectful way, it kind of really does hinder the show. When you watch these episodes, he's not on camera as much as Mikey, and sometimes when he is on camera, he's speaking Portuguese, which, they have subtitles. I don't really have a problem with it, but from a marketing perspective, it was kind of a weird move, and there's probably going to be some controversy with this one, but I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to point out that he's not a no-gi competitor. Not that he's never competed in no-gi, but he's a highly accomplished athlete in gi. And this show is no-gi jiu-jitsu. And there are guys that are in this competition who have more accolades in no-gi than the coach. So that's kind of a weird dynamic. And to be fair, watching the show and watching how that kind of played out, I don't really think it made that big of a difference because you have such skilled, experienced no-gi guys. They're able to help whoever's competing that day. And I'm sure Harrison was very helpful too. I mean, he's obviously very, very skilled in jiu-jitsu, but I just think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say, hey, this is a no-gi jiu-jitsu competition, especially in 2025 when the sports have kind of, divulged a lot. Not saying that there's no interplay between the two still, but if you look at the track jiu-jitsu's on, they're only moving farther and farther away from each other. And now we move on to the coach of the other team, Mikey Musumeci. Guys, on this channel, if you've watched my videos before, I try to be very, very fair and balanced in all of these arguments I make. Even if I don't agree with one side of the argument, I do try to at least give what their argument is. And I don't know. I can't defend this one. And this is not taking a shot at Mikey himself. There's plenty of that on the internet if you want to go do that. But I think having Mikey as the coach kind of shows that the UFC doesn't fully understand the grappling community. I think they sort of overestimated how much the grappling community likes Mikey. He is a phenomenal competitor, one of the best to ever do it, for sure. But I think there are a couple reasons why he probably wasn't the correct choice for a coach. And now one of the main reasons I just don't think Mikey was the right choice for a coach for this show is Mikey's not great at talking to people or cameras. And again, that's not like a personal attack on Mikey. We're all good at certain things and not great at other things. Obviously, Mikey's one of the best people in the world at jiu-jitsu, but being a coach on this show isn't just about how good at jiu-jitsu you are or even about how good at coaching jiu-jitsu you are. This is a reality television show. You need to be able to talk to the camera, develop a relationship with the audience, and that's not really Mikey's fault. I actually put a lot of that fault on the UFC for not realizing this. Mikey has spoken on camera thousands of times. You can go watch any of his YouTube videos. I just don't think he's great at getting the ideas across, maybe even like what he's thinking in his head to the camera and in a way that's going to resonate with audiences. That again is coming from somebody who works in marketing. Maybe I'm overthinking that part too much because that is something I deal with on a daily basis, but I just don't think that he was the right choice because so much of this job is doing exactly what I'm doing right now. Speaking with a camera, trying to resonate with an audience. I don't think he does a great job of that. And I think you can tell by the way this show is shot and the way it's presented that is what the UFC was banking on, is that Mikey's going to be able to resonate with an audience and that people are going to just like him so much already that they're going to watch. And I've been talking to a lot of people, I've been reading a lot of things online, and it's really, I think, turning people off. And as I mentioned when I was speaking about Harrison, they stick the camera in Mikey's face every 2 seconds. The guy is always talking to the camera. So if you're going to have somebody who's speaking to the camera this much, and in fact, that's another criticism I have of the show, is that I don't get to hear Harrison's side a lot of the time. They're just constantly putting the camera in Mikey's face. And I don't want to make it sound like there's nothing I like about the show. In fact, there's a lot about the show that I actually really do enjoy, and specifically the matchups. I think they've had some phenomenal jiu-jitsu matches on this show. It is a little weird that they chop so much of it out, but I also understand that the UFC does have to try to appeal to a non-jiu-jitsu audience, and to be honest with you, this is no surprise to anybody watching this video if you're a jiu-jitsu fan. Jiu-jitsu can get a little boring at times. I mean, that happens with all grappling sports. Wrestling, I find painfully boring at a lot of times, and even with judo and stuff like that, so that's just a natural byproduct of grappling, and I understand if you're trying to retain an audience and you're trying to gain a new audience into the sport and to your show, you know, that's like something that maybe I don't love, but I can kind of understand why they would do it. I also did think the seeding was a little bit weird. Obviously, having somebody like Andrew Tackett ranked number 1, Josh Cisneros ranked number 2, yeah, that makes sense. But there was just a couple things with the seeding, but I'm also willing to believe that there may have been some behind the scenes kind of decisions made with that seeding that I just wasn't privy to, and it probably does make sense somewhere. I just thought on the surface, you know, there were some things I probably would have done differently. But as I said, there were some really, really fun matches to watch. Keith Krikorian versus Isaac Doederlein. I mean, that match, I'll watch that match all day. If those two guys want to have a rematch anytime, I would love to watch that again. Gianni Grippo versus Carlos Henrique, I think, was a really fun matchup. I love watching both of those guys compete. And now for the part of the video where I ask, what do you guys think about the UFC BJJ Road to the Title series? Are you loving it? Or are you not loving it so much? Or are you someone like me, who I'm really loving certain aspects of it? The phenomenal matches, some of the super skilled competitors that I love to watch. And then there's some parts that, you know, I'm not so much loving. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Drop it in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know if there's anything else in this series that you want me to cover. I think I'm back. I think I'm back on YouTube. So if you enjoy this style of content, if you enjoy submission grappling, if you enjoy jiu-jitsu, if you enjoy watching YouTube videos of some guy in a hat with an alien in the background, click that subscribe button. That helps me out a lot. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.